Welcome back, YouTube. We are going to dive in on the gear for the 30-second and out crowd, so you can give me the thumbs up before you run away. I'll summarize it for you. Optics pistols are really cool. I think you should buy an optics ready pistol and not direct mill a sight for your first gun with a dot, or use a dovetail mount. The optics that are really popular right now are the Trijicon RMR and the Delta Point Pro. Typically 3 MOA or 6 MOA are the two choices you'll get on dot size. I recommend the 6 MOA as being a little bit easier, although 3 is not bad and they're really similar. If you need holsters that work for carry, Harry's Holsters, use the discount code Humble Marksman and save 10%. For competition, the Red Hill Tactical holster with suppressor height sights is squared away for carry, or for competition. Now, let's dive in and I'll show my work on all of that. What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 in a 3-part series on adopting the red dot pistols. We're going to be focused on hardware and red dots. Go ahead and hit the like button if you could, please. That helps me out. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And we'll be talking about gun selection, red dots, and all the wonderful things that come with them. Now, my approach to red dots is going to vary from what is typically echoed on the internet about what you should do if you're adopting the red dot pistol. What's on the internet is that you should get it direct milled. It's going to give you a lower bore axis for the dot and all this kind of stuff. And at this point, that data is, a lot of that opinion is probably 4 or 5 years old in 2018. And it's not wrong, it's certainly valid. But my approach is that you should probably start with an optics ready gun, or if you have an existing gun you're curious about, get a dovetail mount for it and test it out. Now, the reason I say that is the current generation of red dots, while much better than it's ever been and very good, is not quite ready for prime time. The batteries can fail, the battery life isn't great, glass can crack, housings can crack. A red dot is subjected to a huge amount of abuse while riding on the slide and recoil. So the optics ready pistols are likely to offer you flexibility that the future generations of red dots will not. Further, if you mill a pistol, you're going to be married to that one optic footprint now and forever. Trijicon Gen 2 is the most rugged of the red dots right now, but it has a very unique footprint that will not accommodate basically any other sight except for the Holosun 507C, which shares a footprint with it. But that's not the most shootable dot and may not be what you want to dive in with, because it's a $500 optic right now. Further, talking about the height over bore, while this is a concern and these other optics may introduce absolutely huge backup iron sights, when you're actually shooting the optic, you don't even notice the height over bore. What you notice is you look at the target, because using a red dot is completely target focused, and you just move your little red dot over to where you want to hit on the target. So the height over bore is not a huge thing. Now, I do have a theory that the height over bore does subject the optic to additional abuse, specifically on something like a PPQ, which has a very high height over bore for the sights already. Mounting a dot on top of that is probably subjecting it to more centrifugal force and tearing up the electronics a little bit faster than something like a Glock, which has a lower height over bore. But nobody's collecting data on that, so that's just a theory of mine right now. The other downside to a large height of bore, again, is the sights get really, really big, and that affects your holster selection. But again, people are starting to make holsters for them, so it's not as big a deal. If you need a holster for carry for these, then check out Harry's Holster. His line of holsters absolutely will accommodate any height suppressor sights you may want to throw at it. They are very squared away holsters. You can use the discount code The Humble Marksman and save 10% over at harrysholsters.com. And before we move past this, I am fully aware of the hype on the internet that the MOS system will fail and throw your optic down range and all that. I did some research into that, and what it basically amounted to is, I'm not sure if it's the case now because I don't have an RMR, but the early RMR plates and screws that Glock had would not seat the optic properly. As a result, Trijicon responded by issuing their own plate for the MOS guns with their own screws that work fine. So now, as long as you buy that adapter and those screws, you're good to go on mounting it to the MOS platform. The other popular belief is that if you dovetail a sight into the slide, then it's better for one-handed manipulations, clearing malfunctions, all that kind of stuff. And I'm glad you brought that up. We are picking a sighting system for its ability to sight on the gun. We are not picking an aftermarket slide racker that we bang on fence posts. You can do that. You absolutely can do that. I wouldn't want to do that because it becomes the primary means at which you put rounds on target with. And if you shift your zero or potentially break your optic, that's not a good thing. So is the MOS or modular systems more likely to give up the ghost while banging it on fence posts? Maybe, but I never know because I think it's a terrible idea. And I don't find myself in situations where I need to clear malfunctions while shooting one-handed. And I would suggest that the typical use for these pistols is not going to find themselves in that scenario either. But if banging optics on fist posts is your deal, definitely direct mount an RMR. That's going to be what you need in order to do that and be happy. Now, if you're buying a pistol, what pistols are out there in 2018 that you can get that can mount optics to right out of the box? Well, I'm glad you asked. Glock obviously has their MOS line that will accept most, if not all, optics, and people make plates and adapters for the ones that are new. The Walther Q5 Match or Q4 Tactical also can accept all sorts of optics. The FN 509 Tactical has probably the best optic mounting system of any of the ones currently available on the market. The original optics ready pistol is the Smith & Wesson Core. Now, I would hesitate recommending that because they recently updated all their M&Ps to the M2.0 series, and the core guns are not updated to that yet. I gotta believe that eventually they're going to update their optics mounting system to the new guns, and support for the OG M&Ps may fall off. Now, CZ just recently has announced that they're bringing their P10F optics ready to the market in the US. They're not out yet, but I gotta believe within the next 6 months they're going to come out. So if that's your speed, that's a good option as well. And then obviously 6 Hour sells their P320RX, which comes with the Romeo 1, or the P320X5, which can accept the Romeo 1 and is a fantastic competition gun. Now, if you pin me down and make me pick from the current generation of the dot ready guns on the market, I would say the Glock 34 Gen 5. The 34 Gen 5, while it has the shortcomings of the MOS system, is a very squared away pistol. It's easily on the level with the other guns in the segment, but it's one of the few that offers co-witness irons and has immense aftermarket support. At full price on the MOS, you may want to look at other options because there really isn't a huge amount of difference between them. If you don't like Glocks and you can't shoot Glocks, maybe that's not for you. Find something you do like and shoot that. We're living in a great age of firearms. They're all about the same. One's not going to make you materially better than the other. Just get one you like and start training with it. But if you do decide you want to modify your slide, definitely get a slide cut that dovetails the RDS into the rear slide and provides additional security. It really sinks it down into the slide, and it also helps stabilize it kind of with the forward to rear movement of the pistol and recoil. It's definitely the way to go. So somebody like ATEI or Fire for Effect Customs, they all do that. Some of the less costly machining actually just wallows out a pocket similar to an MOS, then threads screw holes into the slide. If you're going to mill a slide right now, I would suggest really do it with an RMR. That's the most universal footprint, and it is probably going to see adapters if the dots do come out wildly different, so people can retrofit their existing RMR guns to whatever the new hotness dot that may come out in the next couple years. Now, as far as dots go, there are basically two front runners as far as reliability and ruggedness is concerned. It's the Delta Point Pro, which has one of the largest screens with the clearest glass and very bright dot available, and is very easy for new people to learn how to shoot dots on, which, according to my contact at one of the major firearm manufacturers in the QA department, assures me is the most robust from a withstanding a recoil standpoint than all the other dots. And the other is the Trijicon RMR, especially the Type 2. That's the most physically rugged and can accept the most abuse from the environment. Now, the downside of the RMR is that it has a very small window with kind of a blue tint to the glass that distorts a little bit around the edges. The shorter window makes it harder to track the dot in recoil for new guys, and it costs about $500, which is a huge, huge issue. Now, I'm going to have affiliate links in the description below to Amazon where you can just check these out. It's a place where you can look at dots, all that good stuff. The prices are typically okay, but if somebody has sales on all the other sites, then you might want to check those out. Now, other popular choices from this generation of dots include the Vortex Venom and Vortex Viper. Those are both good options. I believe they have an 8-hour shutoff, so if you're shooting matches with it, you need to make sure that the dot is still on, especially IDPA where you're not allowed to take sight pictures and all that kind of stuff. For you IDPA guys, The tip to that is you can look and see if your dot is on while the gun is still in the holster. If you need to do that, you can turn it back on in the holster and you'll be good to go. Other dots that are worth considering, the lowest price option is the Burst Fastfire 3, which has a window roughly the size of the RMR. The housing is not super robust, so you can't really bang it on fence posts or any of that great stuff. But it seems to stand up to recoil really well. I have a couple buddies who have over 10,000 rounds on them, so they seem squared away. The SIG Romeo 1 is actually the lightest weight offering of the current generation of dots. The dot is very bright. The window is nearly as large as the Delta Point Pro, but it's about an ounce lighter than a Delta Point Pro if you don't put the shroud kit on it. The Delta Point Pro weighs about 1.8 ounces. The Romeo 1 clocks in at about 0.8 ounces, so it's very light. If you add the steel shroud, the gap between the Delta Point Pro and the Romeo 1 closes dramatically. Another benefit of the Romeo 1 is the housing for the optic is set up such that you can actually use it as a rear sight. You could probably order a custom front sight from Dawson Precision to make it actually zero for whatever ammo you use. That said, back to the Delta Point Pro, it's not all puppy dogs and roses with these guys too. The only adjustment for the Delta Point Pro is a button that's inside the window for that. You don't have an up and down, you have to cycle all the way up and then all the way down, which some people don't like. However, it doesn't get in the way if you're doing manipulations from the rear of the slide where you're potentially adjusting your optics brightness when you don't mean to. The optic body is very tall, and as I mentioned, that creates a really tall rear sight. But the Delta Point Pro, if you have to give up your rear sight dovetail, sells a sight for $75 that mounts to the optic body itself, and it's fully adjustable, so you can zero it based on a suppressor height front sight to whatever ammo you're using, which is good. Now that said, of the current generation of dots, I would recommend something if it's for carry that is either always on, like the Trijicon RMR, or has shake-awake technology like the Romeo 1 and the Delta Point Pro. The RMR gets phenomenal battery life. Now, another new entrance to the market that I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about, because I know a lot of people bring it up in comments, is the HoloSun HS507C. It shares the same footprint as the RMR. It has 3 reticle options, and it has a solar panel so that it doesn't use as much battery when you're shooting in full sun. It seems promising. That the data's not really in yet as if to whether or not it's reliable or not. I'm definitely interested in it, but it's also over 2.5 ounces. It's the heaviest optic by a pretty good margin, at least that I'm aware of. The RMR is only about 1.25 ounces, which is an ideal weight, because if you think about it, you're really bolting on a weight to the rear of the gun, and that's going to affect how the gun feels in recoil. It's going to affect the slide cycling speed. So lighter is going to typically be better. Now, as far as dot size is concerned and what you should pick, the most common dot sizes are a 3 MOA and a 6 MOA dot. Now, the common trope is that the 6 MOA is easier to pick up. The issue you're going to have adopting a red dot is it's not going to be on the window. The difference between a 3 MOA and a 6 MOA is not so severe that you'd be able to see a 6 MOA if you can't see a 3 MOA. So that's not really going to affect it. But what the 3 MOA will do that the 6 MOA won't do quite as bad is it's going to telegraph muzzle movement more. The smaller, finer dot is going to shake and vibrate more, and that's going to be distracting. Now, the 6 MOA dot is probably easier, and the way if you're in a store looking at a bunch of dots, what you need to do to really get a flavor for it, because in low light the dots will bloom. Now, you can bloom a dot in low light to look like a 9, 10, 12, 15 MOA depending on how dim it is, and just be a huge red starburst in your window. So don't go in the store and turn up the dot all the way and see how big it looks. What you need to do if you want to get a true flavor for how these dot sizes are going to affect you is adjust it so it's just barely visible and not blooming at all, and look at it that way. That's going to telegraph to you the way that the dot will look in like a full sun environment when you do have the dot maxed and it doesn't bloom at all. It makes a big difference if you're practicing in your basement or your garage in dry fire and you have this big, beautiful bloomed orb versus just a very small, fine point. And that's really going to show you what the difference is. 6 is probably easier to learn on. I won't say that 3 is more precise or necessarily better. For the optic I chose, that's the optic that I wanted. They have a 7.5 MOA triangle or a 2.5 MOA dot. I went 2.5. So a dot brightness is going to affect the visibility of the dot on the screen more than necessarily the dot size. So you want a dot that can get very, very bright. So what's my recommendation with all of that having been said? If cost is no object and you want the best, based on your use, look at an RMR or look at a Delta Point Pro. If you're more budget conscious, I would honestly have a hard time telling you not to look at the Vortex. The Vortex options are pretty solid, but I have heard of the housings to crack. That said, if you don't have one yet, you need to get a Wheeler accurizing torque wrench. I've got a link in the description. You need a torque wrench to install a dot. If you read the manual on any of these dots, it's going to say tighten to XX inch-pounds of torque. On the Delta Point Pro manual, it says 20. On the SIG Romeo 1 manual, it says 30. The SIG Romeo 1 actually recommends tightening the battery cap cover to 10 inch-pounds of torque. If you want to install your own dot, you need an accurizing torque wrench. So pick one up on Amazon. They're about $40-50 depending on the time of year and what sales are going on. So long story short, you need an accurizing torque wrench to secure the optic to the gun and in some cases to secure the battery cover to the optic. Again, if you need a holster, a good holster for carry would be the Harry's holster. Use the discount code The Humble Marksman at checkout. And if for the competition side, the Red Hill tactical holster with the suppressor height sight modification is pretty squared away. That's what I've been using on my Glocks, and it has been fine. In the next video, we're going to talk about some techniques and drills to get accustomed to the dot, to warm up to it, and just generally get good with the red dot. So I appreciate you guys watching, and I will catch you on the next one.